Welcome to Ethics Program Communication for a Disrupted Workforce. I'm Patrick Shepard. It's very nice to join you here today virtually. You may notice some changes to OGE Studios because I, like many of you, am working from home, so I don't have some of the benefits of OGE Studio. So if the quality of our presentation today isn't quite what you're used to, our apologies, but we're doing our best trying to get through the situation the best we can for the first time. So where to start when we're thinking about communicating during this pandemic? Well, I think the place I'd like to begin is looking at some previous guidance we've given on enterprise risk management, specifically some slides we've used in past years to think about where and when we find risk in organizations. So where do we find risk? We've said before that we find risk where our work affects outside entities, where there's an infrequent or isolation from oversight, where there's isolation from preventative guidance or infrastructure, for example, distance, geographic or otherwise, from the ethics office, pure geographic isolation, and punitive decision-making environments. So environments where if we get the wrong answer or if we fail, bad things happen. And I think most of us can think about our organizations right now and say that, at least some of these apply during this time of disruption. So many of us who are responding directly, your work is affecting outside entities in ways it hasn't before. Isolation from infrastructure. We have people who are literally isolated in their homes, not able to go to the office, and maybe only able to speak to their family members or just themselves. Likewise, geographic isolation, and some of the decisions our government's making right now may have very negative consequences if we get them wrong. So it looks like we are experiencing some elevated risk per these criteria. We also have some things we've talked about before about when we find risk in organizations. And these are some that we've addressed before: increases in workload, deadlines, changes in leadership, reorganizations, and reductions in force. So basically, when we have disruption and great time sensitivity, we see an elevated risk for ethics challenges. And again, I think in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, all or some of these are present in a lot of organizations. So we didn't elect to have this sort of risk profile. We didn't seek it out, but it is our situation, and it's important as ethics officials for us to help our agencies manage. We also have some novel sources of risk, sort of general uncertainty, new kinds of mission work that are being asked of us through legislation or through new policies. We have a rapidly evolving situation where, one day to the next, you're not sure what the workplace is going to look like. We may have a lack of existing procedures to do some of these new kinds of work. So in addition to our sort of standard battery of risk management questions, we also have these novel kinds of risk taking place in organizations. So if we understand that we're facing an elevated kind of risk, what should we do as ethics officials to help our agencies manage in this difficult time? The first thing we need to do is find out how and where we can help. And that's going to start with remaining informed. So reading legislation that affects your agency to see what your folks are being asked to do. Communicating with your ledge affairs folks so you can know early if there are going to be new grant programs or new procurement situations where you're going to need to do conflict of interest scrubs. You can read new policy directives coming out of your office to find out what people are doing. Because folks are going to be busy. Their first priority is not going to be briefing the ethics office on new and important activities. Reading your agency's news releases to find out what they're talking about, the work that's taking place. And if you know people are facing elevated risks or elevated kinds of difficulty, you can ask the leaders of those organizations to help you help them. So, provide the information you need to effectively manage the conflicts of interest or other ethics concerns that might be present. So if we're going to help, we need to have the tools and we need to know who's available and when so that we can keep tempo with our organizations. So doing an inventory of your staff availability, seeing that you have someone available during the core work hours. I know a lot of folks are working unusual hours to manage the challenges of childcare or having two spouses who are trying to simultaneously work from home while the kids are home from school. So knowing when people are in the office and available can be very helpful to you. Knowing their level of connectivity. I know a lot of organizations, this has been a bit of a bumpy road getting up and running, so if you have folks who are phone only, or you have folks who have phone and email, or it's sporadic, knowing that can be helpful to set expectations with organizations that you're supporting. and also making sure that you have the skills and abilities to address challenges. So if you have a limited number of folks who are fluent in the conflict of interest laws, making sure to prioritize the work so that they're doing the most important conflicts work and aren't being used in places where you maybe have some greater depth in your team. So something else we want to think about, we want to phrase our outreach carefully. Everyone's under a lot of stress and strain. They're working under very tight deadlines. They're trying to make difficult decisions. So I think we want to take a helpful rather than a scolding tone. So we want to emphasize that we're here to help. We want them to get the work done. We want to help them make sure they do that as quickly and within the law as possible. What about everyone else? So, certainly some of our agencies and organizations have employees who are responding directly, who are doing new and novel kinds of work. But you also probably have a lot of folks who are just facing the challenges of not being able to come into the office, conducting their business lives as usual, but 100% remote. How can we assist them? I think one of the biggest things, and it may seem obvious, is tell them how to reach the ethics office for assistance. I suspect you have people in your organization who are accustomed to just stopping by and pop into the ethics office if they have a question. They may not know that there's a hotline or an email box. They may not have confidence that those systems are working. So if your systems are working, communicating that can be very effective. If there's been a change, if the email box, say, doesn't work and it's telephone only now, or if there's different coverage, so different numbers, different times a day, letting people know how to get a hold of you is a really important first step. Calibrate the frequency of your messages. You don't want to be a pest. You don't want to send them twice daily communications from the ethics office. But you probably do want to communicate with people a little bit more than you did in the physical office space, because some of those incidental communications, the bumping into them in the hallway, the seeing them at the all hands, those aren't taking place. So you may want to increase the volume or frequency with which you are talking to all hands or particular groups of employees. To the extent you have helpful information, provide it. If you have quick start guides, or if people are facing a certain kind of challenge, for example, fundraising or crowdsourcing, and this is something that's happening in your organization, let them know how to get help with those situations so that they can manage their response to this crisis in a way that's consistent with the ethics laws and regulations. Just want to use a friendly tone. I think a lot of folks are anxious. They're doing their best. They're struggling to get used to this new way of working. So I don't think we want to take an accusatory tone, but really a helpful and understanding tone, because I think it is a lot of stress for people, and we don't want to be inadvertently adding to that stress and anxiety. So we have kind of 3 steps. We assess needs, we evaluate the tools and resources, and we deliver the messages. And if we calibrate these to get them sort of appropriate, in line with the risks our agency actually faces, I think we can help our agencies get through this as best we can. So just some practical tips to recap. Calibrate our tone. Take a helpful tone because people are under a lot of strain. Use targeted communications for those at elevated risk. We'll have to match the operational tempo of our business units. Our folks are moving fast in response to this crisis, and we're going to have to be able to move with them. So if you have folks that need you to vet press releases for endorsement concerns or things like this, we're going to be able to need to fit into their timelines rather than vice versa. Again, carefully consider the frequency of your messages. Don't want to bother people too much, but you want to remind them that you're here and available to help. Use the regulatory flexibilities where you can, or where it's appropriate to do so. So, if you had planned to do your annual ethics training this month, and you can put it off until we're back in the office, that's something to consider, at least for appropriate audiences. If you have people who are deployed to the field who can't comply with financial disclosure requirements, you could consider giving them extensions, those kinds of things. Just remember that stuff's available and available to you as an ethics program leader. Sometimes compliance is not going to be possible. Sometimes things are going to be late. Sometimes you're going to hire someone in the field and it's not going to be possible to get them, say, initial ethics orientation on time. So you want to document that and why, and also use the best alternative to the compliance requirements. So if you have 1 or 2 or a handful or even a bunch of people out in the field who are new hires and it's going to be tough to meet the IEO requirement, at least get them written materials. Consider having teleconferences in place of face-to-face meetings, and certainly try and bring them back into compliance as soon as it's practicable after things have calmed down. And finally, I'd like to leave you with one last tip, and that's to look after yourselves and your team. If you're not healthy and well rested and coping well, we can't be any help to our colleagues in our agencies and our organizations. So we want to make sure that you guys are looking after one another and being conscious of your own health. So we hope that you are staying safe, staying healthy, working hard to help your organizations manage in these difficult times. We're going to continue to communicate with you and help you the best we can. As always, you can reach out to your desk officer with questions or concerns. We hope this helped, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.